My name is Natasha Mitchell. I'm from ABC Radio National, where I host a program called All in the Mind. It's a delight to be here on the last day of the 2010 Sydney Writers' Festival. It's been a fantastic festival this year. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Lona Frank to Australia. How's the jet lag?
It was starting to fade, and then I met some people who insisted on pouring wine and single malt into me yesterday, and they wouldn't let me go to sleep. So now I'm just hungover. I don't have jet lag anymore.
So we have no sympathy now. Lona is an award-winning senior science reporter at the weekly weekend newspaper in Denmark, but she's also worked in TV as a reporter, as a presenter, as a producer in radio as well. And to top it all off, she has a PhD in neurobiology, so she's clearly a profound underachiever. So let's give her a warm welcome. Lona, we're here to talk about the organ that Woody Allen describes as his second favourite organ.
Right.
I wonder if he calls it his second favourite organ because he's actually never got to hold one.
Maybe.
We won't go there. But you, even with a PhD in neurobiology, you found holding a brain for the first time remarkably bizarre. Even you wanted to cry. You did cry.
Yeah, but that was because of the fumes. But anyway, yes, it was very, very strange. I mean, that's how I start the book. I actually go to this Harvard brain bank in Boston, and they sort of just take a brain out, half a brain from a woman, and, plop it into my hand. And after, I have spent 3 years killing rats and going through their brains, and it's never meant anything. And I've written about the brain, I've thought about the brain, but just, holding one in your hand and sort of realizing this, a year ago, this was a person. That was very, very strange because the person is really the brain, right?
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
When I held a brain, I had this, even though it wasn't my brain, obviously, I had this, and I had the same sense when I looked at a brain scan image of my brain. I sort of felt like it was the self looking back at the self, which was a really strange loop.
Yeah.
Is that what you felt?
Yeah, I remember I did look at a brain scan of myself. All I was thinking about is you can see the outline of the, the whole face and everything. I was thinking, that nose is huge. So I could hardly see the brain. But anyway, yeah, it is very strange to, that feeling that this, exactly, this is the self. This is you in there. And if you, poke around in there, it's not you anymore. It's another person. It's very intimate in a strange way.
Did Sherlock Holmes put it like this? What did he say? I am my brain, dear Watson. Everything else is a
just
mere
an appendage.
appendage.
Yeah.
Is that how you see yourself, as a brain and everything else is a mere appendage?
No. What I see myself as what Francis Crick said, his astonishing hypothesis, we're a bag of neurons, each of us. I really do view myself as a bag of neurons. I know a lot of people find that very horrible in a way and unromantic. And I have to say, once there was an interview in a Danish magazine, and they had this very, very unflattering picture of me, and above it, the caption just said, a bag of neurons. Oh. And I have to say, when I saw it that way, it wasn't great. But thinking of yourself as a bag of neurons are a physiological system. Your body and your brain is basically one system. I find that very reassuring, very liberating, actually. Instead of thinking of yourself as a biological being with something else in there, a mind, a soul, whatever, it is all one.
That's interesting. You've described the neuroscience as the new philosophy. And in a sense, you're doing away with the soul. Some people think that kind of takes the spark and mystery out of being a human. Personally, I agree with you. I think it adds a whole lot of new spark and mystery.
Yeah, I never understood this. A lot of people have this relationship with biology that, we shouldn't know too much about it. We shouldn't know too much about the brain or about, genetics or whatever it is, because it takes away the mystery of being human. And I find that completely out there, a strange way of thinking, because the more you actually go into how the brain works, how the body works, how, fantastic our genetic system is, the more you sort of realize that this organism is really a miraculous thing. I mean, it becomes even more sort of mysterious in a way, the more you go into the actual processes of it. And having the idea of a soul, whatever that is just an easy way out, kind of. There's so much in there you can't explain, so you just say it's a soul. There's a soul that is all your humanity. It's the same as, you can't explain the universe, so you say there is a God who created it. That's just the easy way out. But really trying to figure out how we function, how we work, how we become who we are is, just amazing. Biology is, it is the new philosophy, I think.
Wow, it's the new philosophy. You think that we're on the cusp of a neuro revolution, and I've got to say, whenever I hear the word revolution, I feel deeply and profoundly sceptical. Australians will know that we're meant to be in the middle of an education revolution at the moment, for example.
Right.
So what does the neuro revolution look like to you if we're on the cusp of it?
Yeah, well, the reason I call it a neuro revolution is that I see all the knowledge that comes out of neuroscience in this period of time as kind of one of those scientific revolutions that will bring us to a new place in the way that we look at ourselves, like the Darwinian revolution did, or is doing, because, it's not over yet. A lot of people don't believe in Darwin and Darwinism. But the neuro revolution will make us look at ourselves and look at what a human being is in a different way. And we will come to a point where, it will be completely normal to look at yourself as a bag of neurons. And because of that, we will have a different relationship to how we treat that bag of neurons. We will look at ourselves as, systems that can be shaped and formed in different ways. And we will, I think, do away with the idea of there being an essential self in each of us, a self that is, the true me and the true you. There is no true me or true you. There is the system, and whatever state that system is in, that is you at the moment.
But we still like to attach a label. Otherwise, what's the point of you being Lona and me being Natasha?
Yeah.
We like to label the self. We feel sort of contained within ourselves.
But the self is changeable. It's not, there is no, there is that phrase of trying to find yourself. I should find out who I really am. Well, you should think about who you want to be, rather, and try to get there instead of, there is no you that you should be. And I find that very liberating to be able to look at yourself as, okay, I'm a field of possibilities. If there are things in my psyche I'm not too crazy about, there are probably things I can do to change it. And I mean, in the future, when this revolution has played out and we have, a lot more drugs and cognitive techniques that can, change our brains in different ways, I think it would be completely normal for people to manipulate their brains and nervous systems in ways that, to get at
legally.
Moods or states or whatever.
Because they've been doing that for centuries.
Yeah,
I mean, this is nothing new.
No, but still, looking at it, if you go out and ask people today, for example, so should we enhance people's memories? Only if they're demented, only if they have Alzheimer's. You have ethicists saying that, and a lot of, when I go out and talk about this, a lot of people are really offended at the thought of enhancing normal human mental capacities.
That we might augment the self beyond the natural.
And yes, and that's because of the idea that there is this essential self that is you. And if you augment it, you do something you shouldn't do to yourself. And I find that completely a strange way of thinking.
You met some very interesting people in the writing of this book, and you subjected yourself to all sorts of interesting experiments.
Yeah, whatever I could get at.
Yeah, that's right. That's the true mettle of a good science journalist. So introduce us to one of the more curious characters, Michael Persinger, who is in a mining town in Sudbury, Canada.
Yes.
And you had an encounter with his God helmet.
Right. Michael Persinger is a very, very interesting scientist, I think. He's American, but he dodged the draft. He didn't want to go to Vietnam, so he went to Canada and stayed there. And he ended up in this terrible little town out in nowhere. It's a mining town. And so you fly in, and all you see are holes in the ground, and then there's a university. And that's where he resides. And
it's probably the perfect location for the sort of work he's doing, which is pretty
probably
surreal.
Is, yeah, because he's doing research into the nature of religion, religious experience. He wants to find out, how it comes about in the brain, what it's all about. And because he does that kind of research in a very Catholic area, he has been, relegated to places in the basement. He has rooms in the basement, no windows, no nothing, because people out there really don't like his research. So anyway, you get in there, and you meet this man with, nice gray hair, steel-rimmed glasses, and a three-piece suit. He always wears a three-piece suit. Everybody else looks like, whatever students look like. And he has a waist chain, a watch on a chain. And then he has this God helmet. That's his thing. And it's a helmet that is constructed to induce religious experiences. And the background for that is that we've known for decades, actually, that people who have a certain kind of epilepsy in the temporal lobes, so right about your temples, they actually don't have the normal seizures, and they don't, become unconscious and fall down. When they have their attacks, they just see visions, and they feel, close to God. They feel they might be talking to God, whatever. So they have profound religious experiences as their brain is going haywire. And
they tend to be when they're not having a seizure, to be more religious as a result.
Yes,
a huge degree of religiosity.
Yes, they even talk about this religious epileptic personality, that they are hyper-religious, sort of. So in their normal lives.
Dostoevsky is claimed to have had. He writes in one of his diaries, actually, that he would give, the rest of his life for just one more minute of one of those religious experiences, because they're so great. And I've talked to psychiatrists who have patients, and they will all tell you that this is the highlight of their life, these visions and visitations by gods and saints. It's so great. Anyway, so the thought behind the helmet was that if, people can get these experiences out of just a little extra electrical activity in the right place, you must be able to take a normal person without these experiences, induce this electrical activity, and get visions of God or whatever it might be. So Michael Persinger set out to do that, and just basically took a yellow crash helmet, the ones we know from the 70s, old helmet, and he put some electromagnets into it just over the temporal lobes. And then the thing is, you go into a soundproof, absolutely dark room. It's got yellow shag pile carpet, I get it.
I mean, everything looks like out of the 70s. You wouldn't believe it. You go there and it's like coming back to your childhood. I grew up in the 70s, and it's like,
the waistcoat,
I've been here before.
The yellow helmet, you can see it now.
Anyway, so you go into that little room.
Well, you did this.
Yes.
So take us through this encounter that you had.
Right.
And just before you do that, why did you want to do it? And what did you think might happen? Because your father describes you as Denmark's most avid atheist.
Yeah, because he was religious. We had, countless discussions about this. And I've never been religious. So we started out discussing this when I was 4. Like, why do you believe in this, Dad? And he could never really convince me of anything. But I wanted to, since I was little, I really wanted to, I was fascinated with, my mother was a nurse, psychiatric nurse, so I was fascinated with her patients who were schizophrenics, and she would tell me stories about how they heard voices and stuff, and I would lock myself in the bathroom and just sit there and wait. Could I hear some voices? I never heard anything, but I always had that. Could I get out of myself in a way? Could I have one of those strange experiences that people talk about? So I really wanted to try that helmet, but I didn't expect to feel anything, because I knew about the experiment, and I was in a way ruined, right?
Yeah,
and
Richard
I know
Dawkins
that
had
Richard Dawkins
lobes aren't tickleable at all,
right,
are they?
Right.
He had no experience.
Yeah.
So you go into. Tell me the scene. What happens? Do they rig you up with this helmet?
First, you're psychologically tested in all sorts of ways to make sure that you're not nuts, right? And then you go in there and you sit in the room. You have electrodes on your scalp, just so they from the outside can see that you're not having seizures or anything strange. You put the helmet on, they close the door, really heavy door, so it's absolutely dark and sound dead. You can't hear anything. It's just a dark void, and you sit there for a while, and nothing happens. And I was probably in there for 15 minutes or something. Then Michael Persinger comes in and he says, "So, was there anything?" And he goes through a checklist. Did you experience this, that, the other? No, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay, fine. And he goes out again, shuts the door. And I sit there, so is he going to try again? And then it took 30 seconds maybe. And then everything was just different. Really, everything. It was like, yeah, something is going on here. Something is definitely going on. And it was like, they call it a sensed presence, right? Because what you get is you sense that there is someone else or something else in that room. And some people come out with actual visions, like they saw something. I have this very, very strong feeling that there was a golem-like creature. I really saw this sort of white, skinny, golem-like creature. It was somewhere around my feet, and I had this feeling that it's going to grab my feet. It's going to grab my feet. And I started to hear scratching noises, which was very odd. I mean, you're not supposed to hear anything. And it was, it was completely real. It wasn't just a little bit, suggestion, like you can sit at home and it's dark and, ooh, there's someone out there. This was very, very real.
Did you stay with it? Were you terrified?
I was I got really anxious because that feeling that this creature would reach out was so strong. And they could see it in my EEG when so yeah, it was a very strange experience, but also a great experience in the way that you really, it hits you that, I mean, you can't trust your senses. You can't trust yourself, your brain. It tricks you. And that's interesting, I think.
So what was going on? What were they actually doing to generate that feeling of a sensed presence?
They just use a magnetic pulse, which will, induce a little bit of current in your brain. You don't feel anything. It's the same magnetic force that comes out of a computer screen, basically. And so because you're in there with, you sensory deprive, right? You don't get any impulses at all. The brain begins to fabricate stories, because what probably happens is that you have sort of both your left and your right brain has sort of a self, right? And if you take out one of them, it's like, or if you stimulate one, the left temporal lobe, it seems that the brain will start to fabricate a story of, why do I suddenly feel like I'm two selves here? And then it becomes, a story of, there must be somebody out there. And then what happens to a lot of people, of course, is that they fabricate, if they're religious, they will fabricate a story of, this is something that belongs to my religion. Because it's very typical for people...
Well, they're not doing it alone. There's a whole grand historical narrative around religion that's built and threaded through cultures, and it's not a bunch of individual brains walking through the world deluding themselves necessarily.
Right. I mean, but when you have an experience like this, you will, your brain tries to relate to something that it could be. It wants an explanation. And then the explanation is, if you're deeply religious, the natural explanation is that, this is, a saint, or this must be a visitation from God, or whatever. How else could there be something in here? Of course, that is a problem for atheists. What are they going to meet in that room? and
Gollum.
Yeah, that's what it turns out.
And if it is the self sort of observing the self and trying to make sense of the self, then you know that a bit of you is a bit of Gollum.
I've actually been told that before. Yeah.
But interestingly about the God helmet, and I guess it's still very unclear. He's controversial, and people have struggled to replicate some of his work. But different people experience different sensed presences depending on a prior belief system, don't they?
Yeah.
So the Virgin Mary might be there, or
if you're Catholic,
Muhammad,
or if you are a North American Indian, you will come out with a sense of, it was an ancestor, or I was in connection with a spirit or something.
So you're attaching meaning.
Because your brain tries to explain it with whatever it grabs onto whatever belief system you have.
I have no doubt that people are going to have questions and comments about this, and we will come to you for that. Another anthropologist, psychologist, I think it is, has described religion as, on the basis of this sort of work really, as a cognitive parasite.
Yeah, well, it's not so much on the basis of this kind of work, because this has to do with religious experiences, and most people who are religious or believers don't have any religious experiences, really. They're never visited by God or Virgin Mary or whoever. But belief in itself, I mean, I would call it superstitious ideas, right? They sort of, this anthropologist called Pascal Boyer has been working on a theory that the reason why so many people are religious and subscribe to various religions is that religious ideas in themselves fit so well with the brain. Because our brain is evolved into this social machine, basically. It is evolved into a machine that always looks for, what are other people thinking, what is going on in other minds, and what is the purpose of things, and who are behind these actions and whatever I see out there in the world. So it's a very social machine. And then when you have ideas of, gods or spirits or whatever, it's just very easy to believe in them when you have a brain like that. So that's why he calls religion a cognitive parasite. It's basically just ideas that sort of, get into your brain, and it's hard to get them out because they're so easy to believe in.
With a lot of institutional support.
Of course, yeah. But even if you go to a place like Denmark, which is pretty a-religious, you will still have people believing all sorts of weird ideas. And there was actually an American, I think he's a scholar of religion in some shape or form. He went to Denmark to study this non-believing people, and he actually wrote a book called Nation Without God. And what he came up with was that Danes don't believe in the Christian God, even though we have a state religion, it's Lutheranism. We don't believe in God as the Christian God, but we believe. People will say, I believe in something. There is something out there. So you call it somethingism. The Danes believe in somethingism, which is nice. And it's just because it's so difficult not to believe in something, actually. I heard another anthropologist put it like this. To be an atheist is really hard work. You have to show these ideas away all the time because they're so easy to grab onto.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Neuroscience has really been working very hard to place Carmelite nuns under brain scanners and monks under brain scanners. It's a sort of current obsession to put belief and spiritual experience under the scrutiny of the brain scanner.
I think that's because there has been this sort of strange relationship between science and religion. For a long time, they were like two non-overlapping domains, as Stephen Jay Gould called them. And they have sort of an agreement of just keeping out of each other's way as much as possible. Science should just deal with, the physical world, and then religion was a place where you could go and ask the big questions, is usually what people say. Because you can't answer questions of why with science, right? You can only answer questions of how. And then religion is the place where you ask the big questions and maybe get some kind of fluffy answer.
She's tough, isn't she?
and suddenly it's like the dike breaks, and you have the new atheism and Christopher Hitchens, who was just here, and Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett. And it's sort of like, it's like a flood. Now we really want to use science to look into what is this thing called religion.
Let's come to another religion, Lona, and that is capitalism. Because people are now also quite obsessed with putting the brain as we buy and desire under the brain scan as well. What's neuromarketing? And really, neuro has been attached. We've just been talking about a whole vast field called neurotheology. Yeah. And there's neuroethics and there's neuromarketing.
Now, and that's just another sign of the neuro revolution, that you can use neuro as a prefix to anything, and then it becomes hot and sexy. And neuromarketing is basically just good old marketing with, brain scanners. You try, instead of going out using focus groups, which will trick you much of the time. They're very, very unscientific. So marketeers will try to figure out, how do we shape our, campaign for a credit card or whatever, and really, how do we get the best out of it? And they will put people in scanners and show them different kinds of campaigns or different kinds of images to see where do we get the best response in the right brain areas. Where do we, for example, or the movie industry is a good example, because I talked to this guy, Stephen Quartz, who's at Caltech, and he has been doing experiments, or he's been doing experiments for the movie industry because, as he says, those poor guys, they only have a profit margin of 4%. They really need some help. So he is out there to help them. And the way he does that is they are, of course, interested in making movie trailers that will stay with people, because you put out a trailer and then it might be 3 months before the movie comes out, and you want people to remember that trailer. And you can't ask a focus group, so are you going to remember this trailer in 3 months? Who knows? But you can, if you put people in a scanner, show them different trailers made in different ways. And you can see that some of them really activate areas that have to do with encoding memory, hippocampus, for example. So that tells you, something is going on, something is probably being remembered here.
See, I'm a bit sceptical here. I think every time we encounter a text, an image, the hippocampus is involved. It's involved in encoding new memories. Every encounter we have has the potential to be a new memory. So I think there's a lot of bollocks in some of this stuff.
But that's, I totally agree. And I kind of, in that chapter, I talk to these people about, do you really think this is going to work? And I'm sure that some of it is going to work. They are going to figure out ways of, decoding what are people getting out of this. But I have no doubt that we're never going to get anywhere near, knowing exactly how to, push people's buy buttons, as some people have said. That is just a way out there. We are not, robots that can be programmed to go out there and buy stuff. But we might use this method, for example, for creating better anti-smoking campaigns or, stuff like that. There might be good uses for this, I think. So it's not that the technology itself is evil or bad, although neuromarketing sounds awful.
Well, it's kind of, they kind of market it as, getting into our unconscious buying desires,
Oh, but they're getting in there already with whatever it is they're doing. Commercials are out there, and they're always speaking to our emotions and our subconscious and whatever. So this is just a way of testing beforehand. Can we narrow this campaign down, or can we design this product so that people will actually like it and instead of not liking it? And it might be a great thing if you can use technology and not get a lot of goods out there that people don't like or don't want anyway.